Hey everyone, Mr. MC here. This is a lap guide for the new lap time challenge taking place at Colorado Springs in reverse with the Toyota GR Yaris. So I'm going to go ahead and jump straight into the lap guide. So when you're starting your lap, you can use this dirt patch on the left as your turning point. I'll be using them again when I'm ending the lap, but just for reference, when you're starting a lap, you can definitely use them as well. So this right turn is flat out, and you don't want to turn in way too much, that way you don't screw off too much speed. Go ahead and grab fourth gear, and you can use these barrels on the right as your turning point. This left turn is flat out, but you do want to be careful about not letting the car slide in too much, because if you let the car slide too much, you do risk hitting the wall that is on the right. Now for this first turn, you're going to use a track marshal on the right as your turning point. All you're going to do is do a bit of throttle control and eventually go down to third gear. You are not going to touch the brakes. And there are moments where I completely let go of the throttle. So for example, right here, I let go of the throttle. I don't want the car sliding around way too much because I do risk scrubbing off too much speed, which will give me a poor exit out of this first turn. So mainly just doing throttle control. Eventually I do go down to third gear. So right here. So this is where the pit wall on the right ends. This is generally where I shift down to third gear. I will do a little more throttle control to try not to have the car slide around too much. And I want to try to go for a very late apex. So for example, where these cones on the left are, this is what I'm using as my apex. So if you do it just right, you should not be sliding as much anymore as you exit the first turn. Now for this right turn, you can use the track marshal or the cute little tree on the left as your turning point. This right turn is flat out, and you do want to get pretty close to the invisible wall that is on the right. So you want to get close, but you don't want to turn in too much, because if you turn in too much, you do risk hitting the invisible wall. So you're just trying to be gentle with your turn in. Same with this left turn, just trying to be gentle with your turn in. You don't want to turn in too much to risk hitting the wall or the invisible walls, or end up sliding around too much. So it's all about just trying to turn in as cleanly and as tidy as possible. Now for this left turn, I'm actually going to go a bit to the right because the track opens up a little bit, so I'm going to make use of that space to try to open myself up for a better setup to this left turn. So I go a bit to the right and I use this barrel on the right as my turning point, and I'm actually going to very briefly tap on the brakes. So here I actually use around 25% of braking power, and I'm already turning into the left. Some people use a bit more braking power, but for me, I ended up using 25% braking power. You're just trying to be extremely quick on the brakes to try to get the weight shifting towards the front of the car. You want to get really close to those trees just up ahead, as your apex is hiding around there. Quickly get back on the throttle, turning into the left. You're still turning into the left because you don't want to hit the wall on the right. Turn in a bit more towards the left so you can bring yourself towards the middle of the track, and here comes the RNG jumps, because it seems like every time you take this jump, you get a completely random result. So this shadow is where those jumps are hiding. So before you reach the shadow, start turning in a bit to the left. And just before I start to take this first jump, I do a really quick lift off of throttle. So you'll see in a bit that I'm going to completely lift off of throttle right before I make this first jump. At least in my experience, I have found that if I do a lift off of throttle before the first jump, there is a better chance that the car is going to be on its best behavior when it lands. And you'll see that the car doesn't bounce around as much, and the car even continues to go in the direction that I want it to go. And just be careful about this invisible wall that is on the left, because it can be pretty easy to hit it, especially if you turn in way too much. So that's something that you want to be careful of, but you do want to stay on the left side of the track, and you want to look for this dirt patch that sticks out a bit, because that's going to be my braking and turning point. So you want to brake and start turning in right before you pass it. So I'm going to use a little over 50% of my braking power for a very brief moment. I turn into the right, I go down to third gear, and I start to blip on the throttle to try to force the car to whip towards the right. And I want to be a bit careful with my throttle input, because I want to try to bring myself towards the right side of the track right as this right turn ends. Be careful about getting too aggressive on the throttle, because if you are too aggressive, you risk going way too wide, which will completely mess you up for the next turns up ahead. And this can happen at times. If you nosedive, you do risk losing quite a bit of speed. That's a bit on the random side, so yeah, unfortunately that happened to me. Now if you can bring yourself towards the right side of the track, you can use this wall on the right as your turning point, and you can go flat out through these next two corners. Just be careful about turning in too early because you do risk hitting the wall on the left. So yeah, I'm going to here flat out, and then you can use this dirt patch on the right as your turning point. This turn can also be taken flat out. Just be careful about turning in way too much because you don't want to go into a crazy slide which will scrub off your speed. So do be careful about the invisible wall over here. Yeah, this one's really hard to spot. I hit it quite a few times. You've probably hit it quite a few times as well, so just be careful about this part right here. So you don't want to slide around too much. You don't want to scrub off too much speed. And then there's going to be this jump right here. So you'll go through this jump flat out, but right after you complete this jump, you're going to turn into the left. And what I like to do, and what I've seen some other people do, is they do a quick lift off of throttle as they're making this left turn. So you'll see right there, very quick lift off of throttle just to try to get the car settled in, and then just go through the rest of this turn flat out. You want to try not to be sliding around too much, because if you slide around too much, you do risk losing a bit of time. Now, when I was streaming this time trial, someone brought up a very good question about me not going up to 4th gear. And the reason why I'm not going up to 4th gear is because if I were to shift up to 4th gear, I'm not going to be on it long enough to make much use of it. So if I were to go up to 4th gear, I'd probably be on it for like about a second or two before I have to go back down to 3rd gear. So in this case, it is just better to stay on 3rd gear, even though you're likely going to hit the rev limiter. But as you get ready for this left turn, use the end of the Gran Turismo 7 banner that is on the right as your turning point. And all you're going to do, you're just going to lift off of throttle as you're entering this turn. So you want to do a lift off of throttle right here. Get the car sliding around a bit because you want to try to straight line it through the exit of the turn. And the reason is because you want to avoid going onto the grass and the little driveway that is on the right. This area that I've highlighted here is pretty bumpy, so if you go into this area, the car is going to be going through all those bumps, and that means that you'll lose time. So just try to stay clear from that area. This left turn can easily be taken flat out. You can use this track marshal that is on the left as your turning point, so just gently turn on in towards the left, getting as close as you can to the invisible barrier that is on the left. So those dirt patches on the left kind of give you an idea about where those invisible barriers are. Now, just like when you're getting ready to start your new lap, you can use these dirt patches on the left as your turning point. So you'll go to this flat out on 4th gear, and you'll see me turn in all the way just for a brief moment. So that's just to try to get the car pointing towards the next section of the track, but you don't want to be turning in for way too long, because you do risk scrubbing off too much speed, which will hurt your lap time. And finally, for the final turn, you can go through this turn flat out, use these barriers on the right as your turning point, and just try to turn in as gently as possible to maintain your momentum. And just be careful about not turning in enough, because you do risk hitting those barriers on the right just before you cross the start finish line. And with that, I was able to get a 125.802. My goodness, this is a really tough combination, but hopefully this lap guide helped you out. And if you like this video helped you out, please do hit the like and the subscribe button. It lets me know that you guys like seeing this kind of stuff. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go through all this again, and I'll comment over it, but this time I'm not going to stop the video. So let's go ahead and get that started. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to use these dirt patches on the left as my turning point. This is a flat out corner, so no need to brake or lift off our throttle. Use the barriers on the right, so those barrels on the right as your turning point. Go through this turn flat out, and use a track marshal on the right as your turning point, lifting off our throttle and making your way down to 3rd gear. And you want to try to straighten out it through here, trying to get the car not to slide around too much. This section is flat out. You're just trying to be really gentle with your turning so you don't have the car sliding around way too much. Use the barrier on the right as your turning point. You turn in just a little bit to the right, quick dab on the brakes, then turn to the left and quickly get back on the throttle, trying to reduce your sliding. very quick lift off of throttle just before you make the jump, and that can reduce the chance of the car wanting to do a whole bunch of silly things. Brake really early and turn in well before you make the jump. That way you can bring yourself towards the right side of the track. These two turns can be taken flat out. You just want to try to be careful about turning in way too much so you don't slide around too much and end up losing your time. Then do a quick lift off of throttle, just trying to straighten line it through here, trying to reduce the amount that the car is sliding so you can try to get a faster exit. Now stay on third gear, use the end of the barrier on the right as your turning point. Quick lifts off of throttle so you can control the amount that the car is sliding. Stay away from the right side of the track as that part's really bumpy and can mess up your momentum. This left turn is flat out, stay towards the left. Then use those dirt patches on the left as your turning point. Stay on fourth gear, go through this turn flat out. Just try not to slide around too much, so be careful about your turning input. And go through this turn flat out. And again, be mindful of your turning input so you don't slide around too much. Now let's go through this one more time. Use the dirt patches on the left as your turning point. Go through this turn flat out. Use the start of the pit barrier on the right as your turning point. This is again another flat out corner. Use the track marshal on the right, that is right here, as your turning point. Start lifting off of throttle. Do not touch the brakes. Go down to third gear, a little more throttle control to try to reduce the amount that the car is sliding around. Gently go through these turns, so you're trying to be gentle with your turning input, but you're still going through these turns flat out. Just trying to reduce the amount that the car is sliding. Use the white barrier on the right as your turning point. So I go a little bit to the right, do a quick dab and turn into the left to try to flick the car towards the left. Quick lift off of throttle before the jump to reduce the odds of the car wanting to do a whole bunch of silly things. Brake really early and start turning in well before the jumps to make sure that the car actually makes this turn and bring yourself towards the right side of the track. This left and right turn can be taken flat out. Just be mindful of your turning inputs so the car doesn't slide around too much. If the car slides around too much, you do risk losing a bit of time. And quick lift off of throttle as we go through this left turn, and just trying to make sure that the car is not sliding around too much, so be careful about your turning inputs. Quick lift off of throttle for this left turn because you want to stay away from the right side of the track, because the right side of the track right here is very bumpy. Then bring yourself towards the left. This turn can be taken flat out. Use those dirt patches on the left as your turning point. Go through this turn flat out. Just be careful about not turning in way too much so you don't lose too much speed. Use the pit barrier on the right as your turning point. Go to this turn flat out, and there you go. So again, getting a 125.8. Yeah, a very tough time trial combination, but hopefully this lap guide helps you out. So that's all from me. This is Miss MCA. Good luck with this time trial, and I'll see you in the next video.